Welcome to the podcast designed to fuel your success in selling technology solutions. I'm your host, Josh Lopresto, SVP of Sales Engineering at Telarus, and this is Next Level Biz Tech. Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we are wrapping up an interesting track titled Tech Stack Mastery, how to sell across cloud connectivity and security. Common question we get asked. I started here. How do I move here? Tips, strategies, all kinds of good stuff. And we're going to get into it with my good man, Mr. Daniel Vaughan of EmmettsonROI. Daniel, welcome on, man.
Thank you very much, Josh. Happy to be here.
We got a lot here, man. Let's start out. Let's start out with your story. How did you get into this field? Kind of where did you start? Anything winding and kind of wild along the way?
Yeah, I would say that's pretty much the definitive characteristic of my career. I mean, I didn't even plan to get into tech or telecom or even professional sales or business whatsoever. So actually through college, I did have a business degree from the community college. Then I actually majored in sustainability studies at Stony Brook, and I graduated with honors from both of those universities. But unfortunately, grades don't really mean anything in terms of getting a job. So I struggled for quite a while coming out, and I didn't work for the grades, for the ego or the GPA. I did it because I actually did not possess the work ethic or the discipline prior to getting back into that. Throughout my, I'll say, even high school and coming out of college, I was quite frankly lazy and and unresponsible. I did not take things very seriously. I was the kind of the kid that would sleep through class and wake up and just kind of know the answers and get by based off of test scores, but had zero homework average and didn't do anything. But I learned pretty quickly after the few years after high school that is not going to work in the real world. Kind of got smacked in the face. So went back to school and did that. But again, coming out of college, couldn't get a job, so I ended up applying for entry level sales positions on ZipRecruiter because I had 9 years of retail sales. Um, I got picked up by GTT actually as an SDR as part of their inaugural team in New York City. So I started there and began with the whole cold calling, emailing, learning personas, and how to respect executives' time, going through value props and all that. Benefited greatly from the program because they did it very well. We had a 2-week boot camp with full role play and consultants coming in, so really nailed down the foundations. And then when I kind of grew out of that role, I moved over to BCM1, where I ironically, maybe a stroke of fate, interviewed there on a referral from a former colleague at GTT. But I can't say for sure that I got the job for this reason, but I actually was interviewing with Jeff Bloss in his office, the CEO over there, and we shared a professor in college from a very, very nuanced course called Systems and Models. It was actually a modeling software for closed systems out in environments. It was developed by NASA, and it was taught at both MIT and Stony Brook University, which is just crazy to think there was only 50,000 people who ever took the course, and both me and the CEO of the company I was interviewing at took that course. So he pulled out the textbook from his closet, so we were just kind of bonded over that. But anyway, ended up starting there for BDR under Megan Nealon, who's one of my favorite people in my entire career. Got promoted at the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic / moving in with my then girlfriend, now wife, and took on the account base from the Arena One UCAS acquisition that they had. Did very well with that for about 3 months or so, then kind of got sniped over to the channel side by Andy Steinke, and did that for about a year and a half or so. Kind of got to the point where we're looking to make a transition into another role. Got offered something under kind of the white label, one of their white label providers they acquired. I loved it, just didn't really fit in terms of the plan. So they kind of understood that I had to make a decision. So I moved over to Nextiva, which was going well for a little while there. Unfortunately, experienced layoff. Then I spent about 5 months looking for my next role. Wanted to jump into security, so I started at a cybersecurity awareness training company, trying to foot in the door, non-technical role, just get my feet wet. And then unfortunately, got laid off from that too about 4 months later. So not a great road. And then about a week after I got laid off the second time, I found out my wife was pregnant.
Ooh.
So really not great timing. I mean, this is after the wedding and the honeymoon in
Yeah.
Switzerland, the cruise in the Mediterranean. So everything's riding high and then
Oh
crash.
yeah.
So not great, but I ended up saying, "Hey, look, I don't know if I could do that anymore." So I consulted for a former executive who had reached out to help build out a channel and technology consulting company, which I did kind of on equity for a few months there. And then right about the time when I was interviewing for other roles, actually trying to get out of the direct sales game and get into sales enablement after a couple interviews going into very late stages and then either getting turned away or it not being the right fit. Um, my son was born. And I said at that time, at the same time, unemployment was running out, things were running low on finances. I said, you know what? I'm just doing this myself. And that's where EmmettsonROI came from. My son's name is Emmett, it's named after him, and I'm building it in the vision and the principles that I want to raise him by.
I love it. Everybody has such a wild path, right? I don't know that I've ever interviewed anybody on this show that says, yes, I set out to do this and I went
No.
right into it, right? I mean, you see that in you see that in the private equity space, right? Hey, you go to high school, you graduate, you go to Columbia, you go right into private equity, you're an intern, you're an analyst. But this world it just sucks you in, right? And inevitably pulls you in, right? Who'd have thought from environmental
Yeah.
science to starting your own company and being in this crazy channel space? It's a
Yeah.
wild story.
Yeah, nobody in third grade walks up to the front of the class when they're asked what they want to do for their careers. They all say fireman or police officer
Yeah.
or teacher or
Yeah.
something, morally notable, but ended up getting into sales just based off of skill sets and interests. And usually it's people that is the defining factor, communications and talking and learning and building relationships. So
So
something.
so tell us about you've got a unique approach, you got a podcast of your own. I mean, tell us about Emmettson ROI. How do you go to market? How do you kind of distill all that down?
Yeah, so I had experience in every role, right? From direct to channel, between business development, BDR, account management, channel management. So I kind of understood the whole sort of landscape. And then you couple that with the consulting that I was doing, and I started learning more leadership and driving business, directives and things like that. But what I learned through that time is I can't do all of those roles at once as one person with the resources that I have, and I don't have a team behind me. So I started to think about, well, two things. A, what is my go to market from a tech stack approach going to be? And B, what is my demand and lead gen going to look like? So from the first aspect, it was, hey, we can't just be telecom UCaaS agents selling circuits and PBXs or cloud anymore, because it's simply really not enough. And everybody knows what's been going on with the landscape there and how that's all changing and becoming table stakes, going to contact center and a lot of other things, customer experience, broadening beyond just those things. So I had, gotten hooked up with Telarus, went out to some events and started learning more about IoT, advanced networking, cybersecurity, got hooked up with some really good suppliers, focused on the SMB mid-market space where my strengths really are and most of my experience. So I started to build, around that in terms of the tech stack. But in terms of demand gen, I started to think like, hey, if I can't be making cold calls every day while also learning, while also maintaining and building relationships and networking, I was like, you know what? My goal, my number one, my strength is learning and understanding and knowledge transfer. And I use that to solve problems and have business conversations with human beings in an office face to face. So I thought, hey, let's do the same thing with the people I'm learning from. So I didn't even expect it to be honestly having a podcast with executives. I thought I'd be talking to mostly like uh, lateral counterparts like channel managers and stuff. But as it turned out, a lot of these C-suite executives and upper level management leaders in engineering and whatnot were really interested in getting involved. And I think just based off of what I was doing, it kind of uh, expanded. And basically, I host a podcast where I learn and have casual business conversations that are unscripted, unpaid for. There's no hidden agenda, just so I learn, so they get their word out to the channel. And I use that information and I put it into unique, creative ways in terms of my own marketing, which is centralized around really three-pronged approach, which is direct mails, recruited agents that I have and I'm building out in adjacent business services that are not technology related. So there's no conflict of interest, as well as really just going out and door knocking and getting on it. So that's the way I'm going about it.
Love it. All right, let's talk about you've had an interesting path. You've learned a lot, right? You created this business and said, "All right, I'm done with this. I'm going to set my own path, my own destiny." So, walk us through some lessons learned, right? What's your favorite lesson learned, either the hard way from a mentor or just over these last 10 or 15?
Well, I guess to pick one, I think really the two concepts that you need to focus on are value and expectations. And that may sound generic, but if you really nail those down and focus on delivering value, which is what I do sort of with the podcast and the research, and you get in there, you can set those proper expectations and be able to really execute on a fundamental level and then branch out after you build trust. But if you're asking about, a little bit more nuanced, uh, I would say you can't be complacent in terms of just thinking in your lane. You have to be open to other influences and other people beyond your scope of your knowledge and your experience. I've been very fortunate to have a lot of mentors from everybody from the now retired OG Bob Reisman down in Florida, the OG BCM1 trainer, to some others who I don't really need to name specifically, but have coached me both on the business aspect because I tend to be an extremely authentic and I'll say at times maybe eyebrow raising person because I'm very goal and end result oriented and I don't really tolerate when that's not being supported. So I've had some coaching there on how to navigate we'll say the politics, which I'm happy to say that I have less of that to navigate in my own role, kind of just decide my own destiny. As well as just the skills and the sales tactics, just actually understanding how to go about things. It's not all about walking in and being the confidence man. There's a reason why it's called con men, right? You can walk in and talk shop and talk baseball or whatever it is and build a relationship. But if you can't deliver on that with real value, you're out of luck.
So we're going to get into we're going to get into a little bit more of this kind of cross-selling idea here, but maybe start us off with when you and I were chatting a call or two ago, we were talking about kind of preparedness and getting ready for the meeting, and you kind of said, "Yeah, I don't do any of that. I do it a little differently when I walk into a customer call." Can you walk us through what's unique in your approach?
Well, actually, that was more so geared towards the podcast. I do the very opposite when it comes to customers. So for like this podcast, right? I didn't want to know any questions coming into it. I do the same thing with my guests. What I do when I have podcast guests is I meet with them first, just like we did, kind of just get introduced, understanding. I look at their websites, I look through their materials, I sometimes do their certifications. I get an understanding of what it is they offer, how it fits into my current corpus of knowledge and who I'm going after in terms of clients, as well as learning a bit about them from their LinkedIn's. I mean, I had Graham on and I saw he was a scout leader. So like that turned into a question, right? But I don't like to be too prepared because when you do walk into a customer's office, regardless of how much research you've done, you need to be able to have extemporaneous conversations and be knowledgeable, or else you're again like that con man. But when it comes to clients and customers, both with my prospecting and cold outreach as well as going into a client's, I do an incredible amount of research. I do everything that I can. I just got up a call 20 minutes before this or so with a supplier that's totally outside the TSD line card, totally outside of anything traditional telecom, that just happened to be listed in one of the ESG reports for a client that I'm doing research on. I was reading through 100+ pages of the last 5 years of ESG reports, trying to find out what they're currently doing. And here, really to position Abundant IoT, to be quite frankly, honest, because that's what their goals are.
Yeah.
That's what they care about right now. And in there, I found out 1,000 different things. I found out the decision maker's name, what their goals are for next year, the technologies they're using, and what they could be using from what Abundant can offer, and various things. So I do a very, very deep level of research.
And then remind everybody, ESG stands for.
It's environmental, social, and governance.
Got it. All right, I love it. Okay, so let's shift in then to you have a unique approach, and there's a cool example I'm going to call on here in just a second that happened at an event. But maybe before that, what's your advice? You mentioned it kind of when you said, "Hey, I'm going to start this business. I don't want to be just that. I want to be open-minded, and I want to go to these things." So, what's a missed opportunity when it comes to a chance to cross-sell? Anything, connectivity to security to cloud. What's just anywhere you want to take that?
I think being too pigeonholed in your discovery of questions. Again, if you're starting out and you're currently the traditional telecom, shop doing, circuits and voice, right? If you're asking like, hey, did you have an internet outage, or, what's your voice quality like? Did you have buffering on your video calls? Like, sure, you're going to get to that lane, but what if that's 1/5 of all their tech stack, those two things, and they like, no? It's like, well, what do you do then, right? So I just start with broader questions. And again, this comes in. I'm laughing because again, I'm constantly plugging Telarus in my own podcast, but it's true. I learned from these mentors, and Graham put it extremely simply on at the Ascend event, and it's like businesses only care about two things: making money and saving money. So if you find out what that is ahead of time, then you can go in and say, hey, look, I can tell based off of what you do, this is kind of like how I perceive you guys making the most money. Maybe this is your ABC client, and this is how, ways that I can perceive you losing money. And then just simply asking a broad question like, what are you working on today? What are your goals? What's bothering you? What's the biggest, what's the worst part about your day? Just broad questions and finding out what's going on, which is ironic because that's kind of how I got into the opportunity, or at least the discovery, based off the IoT deal that came out of the Ascend event with Graham.
So I love that. I love just to keep it simple. Ask the right questions. I think we all know where these things can go. We know how some of these stories can end. We've seen enough customer discussions. We know that our job is to kind of to guide it, right? And I think we would love to go, okay, we know where this is going to go. Let's just talk about that right now. But everybody needs to build a relationship. The customers need to get to know. They don't know you before today, right? So you've got to walk them down that path. But I like that. I love that idea and that question flow to kind of walk them down that path. Very just open-ended, right? I think that's the key.
Yeah, and listen, that may not work with every market segment, every vertical, and every role, right? I mean, I focus on, SMB to mid-market. I really like working with regular guys and gals, blue collar, saltier people that just are, they are the ones that need us the most. You're not going to walk into the CEO of, Citibank and be like, hey, what are you working on? Like
Yeah.
that's not going to work so much. But for a guy like in this instance that's doing, their transportation and trucking company, like this is a regular guy. He's not even trained in the business aspect. It's just a family business, multi-generation. He takes it on. He's doing the day-to-day. That's what his role is. And he's trying to manage the business aspect without any, advanced MBA from, some business school. He's just trying to figure it out. And he's more focused on the day-to-day. So like when you ask these higher level questions, that's sort of just how things came up. And he was complaining about a driver, to be honest with you, that was, causing, issues with like an accident or something like that. And I was like, well, how do you combat that? How do you take, their word for it or whatever? And we started to get into, dash cams, and then it led into asset tracking, and led to engine diagnostics and all other stuff.
So let's go there. Let's talk about that, right? We had a you go to the Telarus Ascend events. We show a lot of content. We train. We teach. We look at buyer personas. We look at questions and role play and all these things, right? And we like to spice it up with a little bit of contests. And I think remind me here, but I think kind of Graham got up and said, "Hey, I want you partners to shoot a note out to any of your prospects and say this and this and this and this, and the first one to get an appointment wins a contest. You want to kind of lay out maybe what happened there, and then what happened after that, even.
Yeah, it was pretty much exactly that. We went to the Ascend event in New Jersey. We went through some training, saw some suppliers, heard high level, heard from Chad talking about IoT and mobility and 4G, LTE and SIMs and all that from, a comprehensive perspective. And Graham sort of just prompted us. He's like, hey, look, every time we ask people to send out these texts, at least one person gets an opportunity. And I texted this particular business who I'd been talking to about UC. And I said, and it was, I'm sitting in a room surrounded by experts talking about such and such, when can I get you connected with them? It was like, paraphrasing.
Yeah.
And they responded within like 20 minutes as I was there. And I showed them the text. I'm like, look, there it is. So, I got a little gift card out of it and then opened the opportunity. And just a few weeks later, it closed.
I love it. What did that change? I mean, you make it sound so easy, right? But what happened in that moment, or what did that change from your perspective of cross-selling and approaching into these kind of different areas?
So, I mean, it expanded what they understood that I could do. And I think one of the biggest problems we all have across the board is being able to say exactly what we do in this space. I always like to say we're the Chandlers of the business world, from friends, nobody knows. I've had numerous conversations with my wife about it just this morning. She's like, I know this guy, he's in IT. Like, what do I tell him you do? And I'm like,
Whatever you want, honey. Whatever you
because
want.
the because the value prop is so broad. It's
Yeah.
like I'm a managed service provider and a technology advisor. I help businesses make money and save costs, improve operational efficiencies to improve the customer experience, employee experience. Like, it's so broad that it's hard to nail it down because you disqualify yourself. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's just difficult to explain all those things because technology could be anything from a digital business card all the way up to advanced networking and SD-WAN and all this other crazy, IVR, IVA stuff that people just, it's so broad. So I think that's what it did. It expanded their understanding of what I can talk about. I think the nuance to the text was I mentioned transportation and trucking companies that they're talking about. So like they understood I was like industry and specific focused.
Interesting. What did George Costanza say? What did he eventually say? He was in the import export business. I think that's what, maybe
Yeah.
that's easier to just
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. I think I remember that.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right, a lot of good nuggets here. I love the questions. I'm always a big fan of kind of leaving people with probing questions. So in these, we get a couple more thoughts here. But if I'm thinking of, yeah, hey, I'm a partner that maybe I have been in this one silo. What's your advice for those partners that maybe I've been in SD-WAN, I want to go deeper in security, right? I want to learn a little more about that, or stay in tune with it. You talked resources, but I mean, what's worked for you, or what's your advice for others?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. One is, or really three things I could try to isolate and make it in a coherent statement. One is be more confident with having conversations. You're not supposed to be the Josh Lepresto. You're supposed to be the relationship owner. You're supposed to be able to help guide them, not install the devices. You're not supposed to be able to manage all the devices, depending upon your service suite and all that. But the second thing is don't focus on the features. I think a lot of the people, especially maybe I'm generalizing here, but some of maybe the older generation of the technology advisors and MSP folk are people that got involved with the technologies at an earlier time before it was so colloquialized and whatnot. I didn't. I got involved in the sales aspect, so I didn't have my hands deep in the bits and bytes as they call it. I just speak from a business outcome level perspective, which is what I think you should focus on. And then forgot the third thing at this point, honestly, but that's really the core of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
I
I'm
mean,
sorry. I'm sorry.
okay.
Aligning yourself with the proper suppliers that fit your market segment and what you're doing. So if you're going to go cybersecurity, yes, of course, I've had Thrive on my podcast. I've talked to many others. I'm not going to name all of them, but I have like Coro, right? I have Adaptive for SD-WAN. This might fit my SMB market profile better and they know how to speak directly to that market segment. It doesn't mean if I land, a larger opportunity with discovery calls that may fit outside of their wheelhouse, not necessarily, but you have the support based off of what you're doing. You don't want to bring a single location to a global provider. Like that's not what you want to do. So understanding that is a big key. And I'd say I've leaned on, previously James Rinkert, who I work with at Nextiva to make those recommendations. And then now working with Tina Franke and then Mikey B, who's, these people are making these recommendations based off of me simply asking.
Yeah, love it. All right, maybe a final secret here. So as we kind of wrap this up, okay, you've gotten in and you've gotten that first meeting, but maybe what's an advice to advisors? How do you get that second meeting that expands you into deeper into the tech stack? Right, you got the first. Now what?
So currently, I'm talking with them about this is a smaller opportunity. I'm going to use a different one as an example. I'm working another opportunity right now, and they have currently an internet provider at two separate locations that they're way overpaying for, and they're overpaying for services. They don't even need the TV, they don't need the phone that they have. And they have a phone system provider, which is an out-of-state MSP, which I'm not going to get. I said earlier I raise eyebrows, so I'm gonna level tone my projections here. But they're paying for a 5-year service contract on a near end of life, or probably very close to end of life PBX that the 82-year-old owner signed, who's on dialysis and basically got taken advantage of, right? They gave him options when they went to renew, but they didn't explain any of them. They didn't give him any attention. And to a certain degree, I get it because they're a larger MSP and it's a small account. But I would say start with something small that you can help them with, whether it is internet, whether it is, voice, and then think about where you want to focus as an MSP or as a technology supplier. I'd recommend getting it to something managed, which I am doing as managed CRM and full customer lifecycle management, because that completes the whole CX. It's not just the communications aspect. There's a lot more to it. So being able to add a value there and something that you get deeply intimately connected with the client in their day-to-day will provide a hell of a lot more trust than a transactional UC deal. And that could translate into anything. Maybe you're a managed security provider that isn't doing those other things that I mentioned. Focus on those things and say, hey, have we done a great job for you guys? Are you enjoying this? It's like, yes, of course. We've been with you for X years. Well, I noticed you're using X and X and X. Maybe we should talk about some of these other services, because the same way that I source these solutions for you and I support them, I have resources that can help you out in this other area. And then going to your suppliers and Telarus and going to these events and learning how to have those conversations to qualify the business outcome from an ROI perspective up front, so they're enticed to have those conversations.
Love it. Love it. All right. Final thought. Let's look towards the future. Imagine the crystal ball. Imagine kind of the ominous noise. Let's think about, what are you most looking forward to? We got a lot of innovations happening right now. We're in one of the funnest paradigm shifts of all time. But what matters, right? What matters to customers? What matters to you? And just what are you most excited to pay attention to over the next 12 to 24 months?
Well, I hate to say it, but everyone's going to have to say it. It is going to be AI, right? You have to nail down the fundamentals, but I think being educated on the road that it's taking, both from a technological but also ethical perspective, because just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. I just met with, again, another supplier earlier. It was yesterday, and they provide, anonymization of website traffic visitors. And they can tell you exactly who they are, run it across data points and data brokers. And, if you're not using a VPN or DuckDuckGo and auto selecting your cookies, they cross-reference that against all the data points and phone number, email address, the whole thing, LinkedIn. They pull it all together, like 800 data points or some crazy stuff like that, like Cambridge Analytica type stuff. While that's something I could sell and make a lot of money on, I don't know what the R rating is.
We haven't released the After Dark version yet, so you're
okay.
doing good so far. A little slip up's fine.
Okay, no problem. I'll keep it family oriented. But yeah, I could sell that and make a ton of money. I could integrate that with the services I mentioned earlier. But I think having a pulse on what's ethical and being able to foresee that, also keeping in mind, security, because there's a billion different AI tools popping up everywhere. And it doesn't mean just because it might do something for you that you should throw it in there. And then a big thing is, I think, being on top of that, all the new stuff coming out, not just the AI, but the independent softwares that are coming up and competing with the traditional tech stack within the TSD portfolio, and being knowledgeable about that is something that I'm very vigilant on. I've been manipulating my social media feed and deliberately using Chrome versus DuckDuckGo when I want to manipulate my cookies so I get the pass through into my Instagram. And I have a registry of tools that have been advertised to me based off of those, preferences and websites that I visit. And I have a list of 150 independent software providers that are not currently offered by any TSD that do incredible things. A lot of them are just built off of, OpenAI or something like that. And there's tremendous security risks in there. So when you're talking to a client, they're like, hey, well, we're using X and X made in Bob's garage, or just popped up on somewhere and they have an affiliate link, keep an eye on that and be able to try to discern what's going to be real and secure and valuable versus what you can combat in terms of, say, hey, let's maybe go to one of these established providers, like let's steer them that way. So I'm looking forward to being able that kind of gap between the old, we'll say the baby boomer hard work ethic career established versus the scrappy Gen Z folks that are on the forefront, and being able to navigate that with clients.
It's good. And remind everybody, you've got a podcast, you've got a location. How do they track you down? Where do they find you?
Yeah, I got a podcast. It's called the EmmettsonROI Insights Podcast. I released episodes, periodically, usually about 4 or 5 a month at least. I also write up journalistic articles, about usually 5 to 7 or 8 pages that I hand write and then pass through AI to act as my editor for, only just to correct the grammar. I actually write the articles and then have it correct it. Put that into a digital flip book with multimedia, including the YouTube video embedded in there, along with some GIFs and stuff to try to make it a little bit more interactive. And I publish those on LinkedIn, so you can check those out at any time. It's free sales enablement. These are the suppliers that we're talking about here that you could be selling, or or really should be selling, to be quite honest with you. But check those out. You can reach out to me and my website, which is going a full redesign over the next few weeks, at EmmettsonROI.com, or reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, or Daniel at EmmettsonROI.com.
Love it. Daniel Vaughan, thanks for coming on, man. Awesome conversation. Lots of good nuggets. Really appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah. I had a great time. Thanks, Josh.
Awesome. All right, Daniel Vaughan, EmmettsonROI. This has been Tech Stack Mastery, how to sell across cloud, connectivity, security, beyond. I'm your host, Josh Presto, SVP of Sales Engineering at Telarus. Till next time.
Next Level BizTech has been a production of Telarus Studio 19. Please visit Telarus.com for more information.